And one of the things that I tell people who are artistically oriented, let's say, so they're in the entrepreneurial category, is, look, it's virtually impossible for you to monetize your product. That's the first thing you have to understand. So maybe you'll get lucky and you'll figure out a strategy. But if you add contempt for the sales and marketing process to that impossibility, you can be bloody well sure that all you're going to do is starve. So you better drop your contempt for the sales and marketing end of this if you want to sustain yourself through your life. And that's going to be a prerequisite for your creative endeavor.
Yeah.
And so
you can't really create a product and then launch it, because first of all, you don't know how to do that. You might know how to create the product, but you do not know how to market or sell it. You don't know how to advertise it. You don't know how to communicate about it. You don't know how to ship it. Like, there's all sorts of things you just don't know. But worse is, you don't know if people will use it. And so what companies do that roll out new products on a relatively continual basis do is they don't develop the product and then go sell it. They continually communicate with their customers about what product the customer is willing to buy next, and then they develop that. And so you have to have your market identified, and then you have to be in continual communication with the market while you develop the product. It's not, I build a better mousetrap and the world come marching to my door. That isn't how it works. Is that you got to find out if someone wants to buy your stupid thing. And then the next thing is that even if you have a great thing, you're going to go talk to people and they have 50 great things that they might buy, and they're all great, but they're not going to buy all 50. They might buy one, maybe, and maybe they'll buy it this week, but probably they'll buy it in 6 months. And they're not going to buy any of them, no matter how great, unless they're on fire and you're selling water. Because they're so busy already, they're so overwhelmed and preoccupied by their jobs. You come in and you say, well, here, this is going to increase your efficiency by 20%, and here's the 3 weeks you'd have to spend doing that, and then the payoff would come in the next years. They'll say, yeah, well, I'll do that as soon as I have time. And as soon as I have time is never. So if they're on fire and you have water, you can sell it to them. But that's all, because otherwise it's a no-go. So those are all things that are worthwhile knowing, because they're very hard to learn. If you would have told me when I first started developing these tests that one of the reasons corporations wouldn't buy them was because they worked, I would have just thought, really? I mean, come on, really? That's really the reason? It's like, yeah, that's the reason. God, very, very, very problematic. And then they already have their processes in place and they're entrenched. And then the next problem is you don't have any customers and you show them the statistics, but they can't understand the statistics, and they also have 200 other people selling them things, and 50 of them are crooks, so they're just lying about what they're doing, and they can't tell the difference between the liars and the people who are telling the truth, and they can't understand the statistics for themselves, and they can't verify them anyways. So what they ask you is, who else is using it? And if the answer is, well, everybody, then you don't even have to do the sale because you're already rich. And if the answer is nobody, they're going to say, well, why is nobody using this? You say, well, it's the hottest thing that's come along, and they think, well, I'm not going to be the sucker who gets painted red and fired because this failed. They do not think this might make me succeed. People do not care about whether or not they succeed. They care about whether or not they fail. And so that's another thing, is that if you're marketing something and you can say this will stop you from being identified as a failure, then people might be happy about that. But if you say this will really help you succeed, it's like, yeah, no, I don't want to succeed. I just don't want to fail. I don't want to succeed. I just want to be invisible and be left alone. And if you're looking for people's fundamental motivation, that's it. It's they want to be invisible and they want to be left alone.
It's really, really hard to be a good salesperson. And people like that are unbelievably rare, and they're unbelievably valuable. Yeah, well, and the other thing that happens with the artistic and maybe the entrepreneurial types too, they end up with contempt for the business end of the process. And that's a real mistake. And one of the things that I tell people who are artistically oriented, let's say, so they're in the entrepreneurial category, is, look, it's virtually impossible for you to monetize your product. That's the first thing you have to understand. So maybe you'll get lucky and you'll figure out a strategy. But if you add contempt for the sales and marketing process to that impossibility, you can be bloody well sure that all you're going to do is starve. So you better drop your contempt for the sales and marketing end of this if you want to sustain yourself through your life. And that's going to be a prerequisite for your creative endeavor.
Yeah.
Well, and artists are in particularly dire position, because as a visual artist, for example, you're not only competing with all the visual artists that now exist, and there's plenty of them, but you're also competing with all the dead artists who already have an established reputation and a body of work that's still being exchanged in the marketplace. And so you don't want to add contempt for the sales and marketing process to that. And you also probably have to understand that if you want to be an artist, that you're also going to have another job, unless you want to bang your head against the wall until it's bleeding. It's so hard. And I mean, I've known some people who are outstanding artists. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who was able to make a living from the outset of their career as a non-commercial visual artist. Brutally difficult. So, and adding contempt to that is not helpful. You should be very thankful that sales and marketing people exist. Even I know there's the mercantilist commercial element to it that is sort of, in some sense, you can consider it distasteful from the perspective of higher aesthetics, but don't confuse your ignorance of something important, sales and marketing, with your moral purity. That's a big mistake. It's a big ethical mistake, and you will pay for that. Well, you need to be extroverted, for example. So and assertive. And it also helps to be emotionally stable, because what's your failure rate as a salesperson? It's like 50 to 1. It's unbelievable. You have to have a constitution of bloody iron to tolerate that. What's the default answer to, do you want to buy something from me? No. No, it's no. Go away, right? It's worse than no. It's like, no, and you're bothering me. And then even if the best you get is, well...
That's worse, by the way. That's worse than no, I'll think about it, the middle grounds. Well, at least with a no, you can move on.
Well, that's the problem with trying to sell to big companies. It's like,
it's never a no.
Maybe we'll do this. It's like, when? Well, maybe in the next 6 months to a year, which will be delayed. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, we've found selling direct to consumer way less stressful. And, you know, the funny thing is...
And more rewarding, sorry to jump in there, Jordan. More rewarding, because you can actually change an individual's life.
Yes.
With a good product.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, the thing about, you kind of have this idea that you could, let's go for a big company, a couple of contracts, and we're set. It's like, but you'll die in the interim waiting for the contracts. So, and it is so interesting to think about that in terms of the error of Marxist criticisms of capitalism, because the Marxist criticism was something like, capital will accrue in the hands of a smaller and smaller number of individuals, which it does, but the individuals rotate. That's the thing that Marx got wrong. Now, with big companies, you think that, well, the big companies absorb all the capital, but the thing is, they fail. The reason they fail is because they get so large, they're so ponderous, they move so slowly that eventually they make themselves extinct. And you experience that when you're trying to sell to them. It's like, oh, you have this rule. Oh, you have this rule. Oh, you also have this rule. Oh, this rule means we have to completely rewrite our software. And then these special adaptations have to be made. Then there's 20 people to clear that with. And it's brutally difficult.